Welcome back to Africa This Week. Too slow, too little, too late. Unprecedented and out of control. These were some of the exact words used to describe the biggest epidemic of 2014, where the fear of Ebola became the beginning of wisdom in West Africa. Fast forward to May 2018 and the Democratic Republic of the DRC in East Africa finds itself in a familiar territory with Ebola, a place where the deadly virus was first discovered in 1976. Now, joining me to dig deep on Africa This Week is Dr. Janet Scott, a clinical lecturer at the University of Glasgow Centre for Virus Research in Scotland. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you for asking me today.
Well, what is your reaction to the recent confirmed cases of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo and the ongoing efforts to curtail the disease?
Okay. Well, first of all, I think all of our thoughts have got to be with all those families concerned, whether it's a small number of people or thousands and thousands. If it's you and your family, it's an incredibly difficult time. So I think that's all of our first response, is just the thoughts with the families. Of course, the news that we have 2 confirmed cases in a more urban setting from a public health point of view is worrying. And I think I'd echo what's already been said, that it's really impossible to under-respond to this. And it's really great to see the WHO and the other international bodies getting into the DRC and helping people there put their action plans in place quickly.
Well, like you said, it is really worrying, and Ebola is fast becoming a recurring event in Congo particularly, and parts of West Africa. What do you think is responsible for this?
Well, maybe we're noticing it more now than we used to, but really there have been several outbreaks, particularly in Central Africa, since these viruses were discovered in the 70s. But on top of that, we are now all more mobile. We're able to move between countries and across countries faster and more easily. So these viruses and these diseases can spread faster. We're also better able to communicate with each other, so we hear about them more. And I think all of those things can be helpful, but they can also be quite frightening.
Well, about 4,000 Ebola vaccines have been deployed to the Democratic Republic of Congo. How far do you think this can go in helping to curtail the spread of the disease?
Well, this is really an exciting development. It's the first time an Ebola outbreak we've had a vaccine actually at the start of an outbreak. And it's a vaccine that's already gone through clinical trials in Guinea and shown some really promising results there. It's also a vaccine that we've used in Scotland. When we had a case of Ebola, our patient unfortunately had a second bout of Ebola, then those people who were in contact with her all got this very same vaccine. So it's been quite thoroughly tested in people in terms of its safety, how efficacious it is, how good it is. The results from the Congo are incredibly promising. Nobody who got the vaccine then went on to get Ebola, but it was near the end of the outbreak there. This time, this vaccine will really be put to the test, and we will hopefully see how good it is at protecting people from Ebola. Well, but really, it could be a game changer.
Okay. In spite of this, however, the disease has quickly spread from the countryside into Mbandaka city. Do you think this outbreak will be easily contained?
No outbreak is easily contained, but with coordinated effort, it is possible. And in fact, Nigeria showed us that it was possible. When Nigeria had an outbreak in 2015, the Nigerian authorities and medical staff really stepped up to the mark. In fact, as I understand it, some of the deaths were some of the medical staff that really put themselves between Ebola and the rest of Lagos. you had 20 cases with 8 deaths, and the WHO called it a piece of world-class epidemiological detective work. All those people who were working on the polio vaccine campaigns moved over to working on contact tracing with Ebola. And Nigeria really showed us that it could be done, and it could be done in an urban setting too. So it is possible, and we've all been thinking and practicing and putting plans into place ever since the outbreak in West Africa. So I think we can be hopeful that the very best job that is possible will be done this time.
All right. Now, Sierra Leone has embarked on emergency drills to test the preparedness for the Ebola outbreak. What can be done elsewhere, beyond Nigeria now, to ensure we don't have a repeat of that situation that played out in 2014 when the disease became a global health emergency?
Well, I think our awareness of it really helps, and a coordinated response to the outbreak will really help. And being aware of the disease as it spreads will really help. I see you have already spoken to my colleagues in Sierra Leone, Doctors Savali and Professor Sarr, and they will tell you that in Sierra Leone they have remained vigilant, and they have got plans in place, and indeed have continued to rehearse those plans. And that's what we're doing in Scotland too. We are looking at our protocols. We're making sure we know what to do if somebody was to arrive from an epidemic area, and how to keep ourselves safe. And what we look for then, first and foremost, is has somebody been in contact with an Ebola case? Ebola is not airborne. It spreads from contact with mucous membranes. That's the eyes, the lips, sexual contact, or just touch. So if you touch somebody, then maybe you put your hand in your eye. But it doesn't spread through the air. It's not something you can just breathe in by standing in the same room as somebody with Ebola. So the first thing we look for is, has this person been in contact with an Ebola case? Or in the context of other countries, has somebody recently arrived from an area where there is Ebola? And then we look to see, are there signs and symptoms within the first 21 days, which is the time we think the symptoms arrive. And those signs are, first of all, fever, 37.5 degrees centigrade and above. And then the other symptoms are things like headache, fatigue, muscle aches and pains, vomiting, diarrhea, bleeding. The unfortunate thing is that what I've just described also describes a lot of other diseases.
Illnesses, yeah.
So people have these types of symptoms. Really, the most likely thing inside Africa that you have is malaria, not Ebola. So we shouldn't be looking at everybody with a fever and thinking, gosh, they might be a case of Ebola. We need to, stay calm and be vigilant, but also be aware that Ebola in its early stages looks like many, many other diseases, the most common of which is still malaria.
Indeed, and we are being very hopeful that this particular outbreak will quickly be contained. But from your research on post-Ebola syndrome, how do you think authorities can manage the challenges survivors often encounter?
Yes, in collaboration with the military hospital 34 in Freetown, who I hear you have already spoken to, I've been studying post-Ebola syndrome. The hospital in Freetown provides healthcare for over 500 Ebola survivors, which is just over 10% of all the survivors in Sierra Leone. And I would say that whilst some Ebola survivors are able to be well and healthy and get on with their lives, a good proportion have suffered from a range of health problems. The main things they suffer from are musculoskeletal aches and pains, headaches, and eye problems. The eye problems in maybe about 15 to 20% of people are anterior uveitis and white cataracts. The musculoskeletal pain can range from something fairly mild to something quite debilitating. So, for example, I saw in clinic one young man who was upset because he could no longer play football the way that he wanted to before he was unwell. And just a little bit of help with pain relief was enough for him. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have people who are now having to give up their jobs, unable to carry their children, unable to just get on with the activities of daily life. And for them, that's been a really problematic. So what I think would be interesting is to understand better why those problems are happening so that we can try to get to some kind of solution for them. Either a better way of treating Ebola when people have it acutely or some way of helping them with the symptoms afterwards. But it is really important not to forget the survivors, that their journey does not end when they leave the Ebola treatment unit. It's really just the start for them.
Indeed, and that's where we're going to have to leave it now. Dr. Janet Scott, clinical lecturer, University of Glasgow, Centre for Virus Research in Scotland. I'd like to thank you for joining me on Africa This Week.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Well, from dealing with the wounds of conflict to being held hostage by the hands of political instability, the Democratic Republic of Congo is a mineral-wealthy nation, but one of the least developed in the world to deal with a serious health concern like Ebola. And while the world cannot afford to watch Ebola escalate again, Africa can only prove to have learned fast from the past by preparing for emergencies, investing in medical infrastructure and strengthening health institutions for her own good. I have been your guide, Fadishola Shotingwa. Many thanks for watching and bye for now.